David E. Martin. David is the Executive Director of Innovation and Transformation at Melbourne Polytechnic and the Centre for Applied Innovation. Actively engaged in global ethical economic development, Dr. Martin's work includes financial engineering and investment, public speaking, writing and providing financial advisory services to the majority of countries in the world. Dr. Martin is the founder and chairman of M.CAM Inc., the international leader in innovation, finance, trade and intangible asset finance. He's founded several for-profit and not-for-profit companies and organisations and serves on several boards. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David E. Martin to the stage.
I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations of this country, and not just the First Nations of this country, but the First Nations of all countries. Many of us, at times like this, don't reflect on from whence we've come, and it's an appropriate time to think about that because we are the sum of every day that's led us to here, and we will tomorrow be the sum of all those days plus today. I'd also like to take a moment and acknowledge the person standing next to me. I find it often interesting that we think of ourselves as quite an evolved and advanced society, but many times we forget that if we have failed to communicate to one among us, we have failed all of us. And so I would like to acknowledge both of our interpreters tonight. And I would like to apologize in advance for the fact that some of the words that I use are not necessarily traditional in Auslan or any other signing. So I have edited my remarks to make sure I can be heard. Sitting outside this conference center is a very interesting artifact of history. Some of you know that right behind us is the Poly Woodside. Most of you don't know that 49 years ago, the Poly Woodside was sold for 1 cent. When you go out of the convention center tonight, I'd like you to think about that. And I'd like you to think about the fact that that beautiful, majestic ship that's sitting out behind us was sold for 1 cent. 1 cent and 60,000 hours of the love and care and support of people who decided to bring the masts and the rigging back so that we could all see a window into a time that we all have forgotten. A time when the winds blew people to this country, and a time where when the Poly Woodside was built in the 1800s at the cost of about £4,000 in Ireland, which back then was real money. When we think about that £4,000 investment, and when we think about the decades of service that ship was put into, it's very important to reflect on the fact that that ship teaches us an enormous amount about tonight. Tonight, we celebrate the graduates of programs that are largely about communication and aesthetics. The way in which we not only narrate the world around us, but the way we narrate stories that will ultimately not be told by us, but will be told by those who come after us. And where most commencement addresses use the word future at least 20 to 30% of the time, I think it's appropriate at this moment to reflect upon pasts. And the reason I want to reflect on pasts is a very simple one. Over the last several months or years, depending on the program of study you've embarked on, you've actually been engaged in learning how the past has told its stories. What has been celebrated? What has been denied? What has been erased? What has been lost? And you are now standing at a very interesting point in time. And by you, I mean all of you. all of us, we're standing at an interesting point of time where we've decided, through the Googleification of the world, that the only knowable and knowns can be found in a search engine. That somehow or another, if it isn't digital, it ceases to exist. But in fact, what you've done is you've been trained to make a living through an industrial economy model that has said it's about qualifications, it's about meeting someone else's expectations on what it means to be productive. You've been trained in how to represent words and how to represent images, how to manipulate forms, how to build objects, how to communicate and teach, and do a whole host of things, all of which have been framed around teaching you and qualifying you to make a living. But the challenge before us tonight is the challenge of the question posed by the Poly Woodside. What happens when the world changes? In the 1800s, when the Poly Woodside was built, there is no question that every piece of steel, every bit of the rigging, every bit of the steering mechanism was thought to be state-of-the-art. Something that in Ireland, as it was being constructed at the request of the Woodside Company, everyone was pretty sure was going to be around pretty much forever. But then a tiny thing happened. The steam engine became part of shipping. And in a very short period of time, one innovation, the dual reciprocating camshaft, for those of you who are counting, took those beautiful riggings, took those beautiful masts, took those beautiful sails, and turned the Poly Woodside into an artifact. An artifact of a time long gone, a time when the stories of how you navigate the world and how you sail the southern oceans, which is where the Poly Woodside spent most of her life, those times all changed. And it turns out that it wasn't until 49 years ago that a few people here in Melbourne decided that it was a good idea to keep the story of the Poly Woodside here, to help us remember a time, to help us remember the foundation of the world that has become the world we're now in. It turns out if you try to find the charts and the ship logs of the Poly Woodside, Google doesn't help you. So are we going to forget because it's not digital? Are we going to forget because it's not readily accessible? Or are we going to forget because there's not a plaque somewhere? Or are we going to take on the task which is tonight's task? The task of the commencement that we celebrate right now. And that task is very simple. In the world where we see the digital overwhelming us every day, where we have conversations with family members by Snapchat and by Twitter, where rather than calling people to a meal, we text each other to see what time we should pick up the delivery that's going to be delivered at various times because we all have our dietary nuances that mean the table is no longer where we eat. Are we going to train ourselves to be the consumers of the last turn of the industrial economy, or are we going to take the great challenge of tonight, which is to decide to be analog humans in a digital world? Humans that aren't trained to make livings, but humans who are wise enough to learn how to be human and how to live. Tonight's question, tonight's challenge, tonight's opportunity is singular. You've been trained to make a living. Are you now prepared to learn how to live? And as we reflect on that, as we reflect on how we got here, what is living? Well, living is what most of you have just pursued. Living is sharing information with the younger generation. Living is becoming a voice for those who don't have a voice. Putting into words and phrases and symbols and diagrams, and I love the example of writing sign language on the hand. What a beautiful humanity. Can we give ourselves permission to learn to live? To learn to expand, not contract. To learn to open up opportunities where those rare moments of human contact and deep human connection are what we celebrate above the degree to which we ascend in a corporate structure. Are we willing to build linkages across communities and cultures where we can not pay lip service to the homage of elders past and present, but we actually go out into the community and learn the wisdom of people who have dreams and songs that stretch back across 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 years, times that don't even make sense to most of our minds? Are we prepared to deepen our knowledge, not of the competencies that will allow us to advance, but the competencies that will allow us to go inward and innovate what it means to be and how it means to be an effective human that contributes not to just our bottom line, but contributes to the betterment of humanity? Are we prepared to make the difficult decisions that say that value is not denominated through currency alone? It's not denominated through the extraction of rent for our time, but it's for the quality of the time and the quality of the connections that we make with each other? Are we prepared to see in nature and in materials that are all around us the technology that allows us to have access and afford us the common provisions that are required for humanity without destroying those things for future generations by exterminating the resources around us? And are we prepared to set our own interests, not at the preeminence of every action that we have, but are we prepared to set our own interests into a common community that says, we the people are prepared to take humanity into the digital world? Tonight, you're beginning that beautiful space of taking a step that will define not just you, but those around you. And my encouragement to each one of you tonight is to use this moment to reflect on your own contribution. Are you going to make something that is worthy of 4,000 Irish pounds in the 1800s? Are you going to make something that is sold as scrap for 1 cent 49 years ago? Or are you going to make something that lasts, that's worthy of 60,000 hours of love and care and compassion that went into preserving the story of humanity? Our value is not measured by the gold that we compile, by the reputations we build, or by the status we achieve. Our value is defined by the quality and the nature of the human spirit that we ignite in ourselves and ignite in others. And tonight, my encouragement to the graduates is start that fire, let it burn brightly, so that you can be a light to the time into which you now process. Congratulations and Godspeed.